Hello, everyone, and welcome to an all new Deep Cuts Live. I'm your host, Antoine Reid. Today we have with us James from Sinistro Cigars. Hopefully, I pronounced that correctly. So, if you're new to this cigar brand, hopefully you'll learn more about them today. And like I said, I've never spoken to James at length. We've spoken on Instagram a little bit, so I'm looking forward to learning more about the brand as well. So, let me bring James on. How are you?
What's going on, guys?
Yeah, like I said, thank you for joining me. Like you reached out on Instagram, and I was right in the middle of trying to book up the month, so I was like, "Come on, let's do it."
Yeah, it worked out perfect. I thought I was going
Yeah,
to get some more hesitation from you. Uh,
no, I'm like I said, Deep Cuts is like an open platform, pretty much. So it's not for any particular segment of the industry. It's pretty much anybody who works in the industry who wants to come on here and share their story for an hour. They're free to do so. So thank you for, like I said, for coming on and working with me to kind of schedule this.
and thanks for having me. I like doing them on and doing shows myself too. It's awesome.
Yeah, so I was trying to do a little bit of research today on you and listening to some of your other podcasts that you've been on and such. But what I wanted to jump it right into is just give us a little intro to yourself. Like, how did you instead of how did you get started in the industry? Before you answer that question, what was your first time smoking a cigar? Because I'm always interested in this
Okay.
origin story of how it all started.
Okay. My origin story is not. It's cool, but it's not that cool. But I had no involvement with cigars, and um, my dad's an accountant by trade, and I had some money left over from a previous business. Without getting too crazy in depth, I had some money left over from a previous business, and I wasn't very interested. I was more like 19, 18, 19 at the time, and I wasn't as interested in business. So I really didn't care what happened with the money, and I wanted to kind of let go of the other business. It was like insurance sales, and I realized I couldn't do that because I didn't like I my dad helped me with that. Like I used his office to do the insurance side of things, and um, I realized I couldn't do that job because I was sitting behind a desk all day long. And like, I would just look up. My dad was like, across the hall in another office, but like every time I would look up, I would see him just sitting there. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this all day, every day, just sitting behind a desk. I kind of want to like be out and do something a little bit different. So, um, uh, I went out and I realized if I took the money from the previous business, I would probably spend it like a dumb 18-year-old. So I had left it in the bank. And one day my dad approached me and he's like, hey, one of my clients who has a cigar lounge wants to open a second lounge and he's looking for a partner and he knows the numbers and he was doing really well. And he's like, you should do it. And I'm like, yeah, you should do it. No problem. Like, you take that money and do whatever you want with it. If you feel like that's a good investment to make, go for it. I just don't want to be involved in anything. So they opened the shop a year and a half, 2 years later. I had the key. I was there when they were building it out. I never went back after it was open at this time. And one day, my dad's partner calls me up and he's like, hey, and the reason why it was my dad's partner that called me up, because if my dad called me, it's easier to say no to my dad as it is to his friends. It's
Mm-hmm.
harder to say no to somebody like you look up to and respect and you call uncle. So the guy was like, hey, our employee didn't show up today. Can you come in and fill in? And I was like, I don't know the first thing about cigars. Like, I don't know how to sell anything. He's like, yeah, don't worry. It's a new store. If you need help, you can call me, but you'll learn slowly as you go. So I was like, sure, I'll go in there. And this was 19, so like 20 years ago. So back then, the only like Maduros in the industry was like a VSG or a Padron Aniversario. And those were allocated to shops. So there wasn't a ton of them. So when I first walked in there, I walked in alone and I just started looking at the shelves. And I guess I shopped with my eyes. I went for like the I guess the nicest looking one if you're like and if you don't know anything about cigars. So there was a Portofino Mantenuto that was still in the tin. So I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. It's in a tin and blah, blah, blah. And I opened it up and I smoked it. And to me, back then it tasted like cardboard. So I was like, oh my God, why do people smoke cigars? This is, what is this? Like, and being at a cigar shop, like it's being at a candy store. So like I tried another one and I tried another one, and my day wrapped up. But before my day ended, my dad's partner called again and was like, hey, the guy's not going to come in for tomorrow too. I can't get a hold of him. I need you to go in tomorrow too. So this happened for about like 3-4 days. And the fourth day, now I got more comfortable in the shop. So I was like looking behind the cabinets and the humidors, and I found a box of Padron 1964, the Principes. So I was like, well, let me try one of these, It looked nice. We got it like, it has the paper cellophane on top. And so I popped one open and I smoked it. And sure enough, I finished the whole box in 2 days. And, I called my dad's partner and I was like, hey, man, you need to get more of these. These are amazing. Like, I don't know why the shelves are not all of this, And he's like, what did you do with that box? And I was like, why? What do you mean I smoked it? He's like, no, you can't smoke those. We only get like one per every 10 Padrones we get, and stop smoking those. But that's when I kind of started liking cigars, is like that Padron, that darker, rich, full bodied profile, the hints of cocoa. And then just, I think the Portofino was just a little too light for my palate even back then. I don't know why, but that was my first cigar. And then the first cigar I liked was the Padron 1964. And I'm still a big 1926 fan myself, even to this day.
Wow. So before you got into that retail store and you started working there and trying out cigars, like what was your attitude towards cigars? Like, were you just like, were you for it? Were you kind of didn't like indifferent towards it? Like, what was your whole mentality going into this?
So my dad was a cigarette smoker, so I didn't really care too much about cigars. I just hated cigarettes, but I knew the difference between a cigar and a cigarette at that time. So I knew that there was no chemicals into it. It wasn't addictive. It wasn't, it wasn't said to make a person an addict to keep them along for life. You know what I mean? So like with cigars, I know you could smoke for a week straight and then decide not to smoke one day. It's not going to, you're not going to fiend for a cigar, maybe just to, like the only times I've been like, oh man, I could really use a cigar is like after dinner or when I'm really stressed out. And that's not because my body needs it. That's just because it's going to help me relax. You know what I mean? So I was never anti-cigars. I was always anti-cigarettes, especially back then because my dad was such a big smoker and I saw what it was doing to him, his health. So I was never anti-cigars. I was more anti-cigarettes.
Okay. So working in retail, I know is completely different. So you were used to, you probably got accustomed to the customers coming in asking you questions. So what did you kind of learn about the cigar industry just from working in the retail part?
At that point in time, I realized one thing, and I think that's why I was successful as a retailer, is that a lot of people were not educated in the industry. They didn't know, they were just smoking, and most of it was, just what aficionado told you at that time. There was no half wheel. There was no, there wasn't that many. I think Cigar Journal and half wheel, and aficionado were the only two at the time. Oh, and Cigars and Spirits was out too. But, the two big ones were Journal in Europe and Aficionado in America, So I started realizing that, I was learning because I was still getting to learn everything. I had to learn from my dad's partner. At some point, I ended up buying out the business in full later on. And obviously, I learned from him before I bought out the business. And a couple of other people that helped me a lot in the industry. I was really close with the Ashton rep at the time. And now he has like 5 stores. So I had pretty good mentors that were help teaching me. So I found that a lot of smokers were not educated in the product, what was going on. So I tried to educate people as best I could, on the retail end.
And I feel like education even today is such a big issue, especially when I speak to different retailers, because it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like so many people try to be experts and I don't know if they are, and they try to just pick up on what somebody else says. So, and I've been on this, like, been in rooms where people are trying out cigars for the first time and, and the cigar maker's like, what do you taste from this? And like you could just seeing that in that room, like how there isn't that education of the tasting and stuff, and people just throw out weird flavors that you're just like, is that really what you taste? Like, how can you taste that? Like, do you
Yeah,
encounter the problem too sometimes where it's just like there's such like a big gap in between education, and yet there's no real resource or person who's like really sits there and educates even the consumer on what they're smoking.
I get that all the time, and I think because of my age, also I get like a lot of, not every, sorry, a lot of people like they want to suggest to me on, oh, you should do this with your blend, or you should do that, or you should do this, and that's kind of a little annoying, but uh, I feel that also with the problem with educating people is that back then when I first got in the industry, there was a lot of BS out there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like the legacy brands and like still to this day, everybody talks about how like there's different cuts, and this is Velado, this is Ligero, this is Seco, but yeah, they pick like that, but at the end of the day, it's the people who are sorting that decide if it's going to be Ligero. It could have been in a cut of Viso, but it's just thicker and oilier, so it's going to fall into Ligero. So I feel like, not like lies, but I feel like there was like half explanations a lot back in the day. And just like whether it's because of the miscommunication between, back then, a lot of the guys were, most of the guys were like very like strong Latino, heavy Latino accents. So whether it was like, I just want to, I even have some guys now that are shy about speaking around Americans, and they're famous, people in the industry, but they're shy about speaking around Americans because they feel like they're embarrassed. Just like when I first started trying Spanish, I was always embarrassed to speak because I sounded like a gringo, and I'm sure it works the same way back. So whether the misinformation was because they didn't want to sit down and explain, or they couldn't explain because they didn't know the right terminology to use, or what words translates better. But I just feel like there was a lot of misinformation at the beginning, not misinformation, but not full information. You get what I'm saying? And I think that hindered the education level, because once you've heard something, now that becomes true. You know what I mean? As opposed to like now you have to reteach that whole subject all over again.
Yeah, like I said, for me, and especially on the media side, it's like when you mentioned a few minutes ago that back in the day, there's only like a couple sources of information. And so everything that people learned came from those few sources. And now it's a plethora of information. Like you can go on YouTube and there's dozens of cigar channels and cigar related content. And you can type in Google and there's dozens of sources. But the same problem is that there's so much information and all that's coming in from like these different sources. And I just find like people sometimes get so like overwhelmed that they still, like I said, that education factor of learning what the industry is all about and learning about the product. It's just like so difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was a retailer for 15 years between the two shops I had. And the first time I went to the Dominican Republic to start working on one of my blends, it was like I had no idea what I was like. I realized I had no idea about the other end of as much as I learned, as much as the guys came in and talked to me, the manufacturers. I had a really pretty good shop, so a lot of owners came and we did events with owners. So I talked to a lot of them. I picked a lot of their brains. But as soon as I landed in the Dominican, I was like, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing here. So like, and every time I go back, I'm learning something new. So I wouldn't even be able to call myself an expert. Like some people like refer to me as a master blender. I'm like, dude, I have way more to go before I could become a master blender. Like I talk to blenders that like they're just a plethora of information, and like that's a master to me. You know what I mean? I am nowhere near that level, but even me, I'm constantly learning every time I go back, playing with new tobacco. And now that they're hybriding, slicing seeds and all this other stuff, that now like you're in a whole new ballpark and you're playing with it's stuff that you thought you knew. You're still, now you have to relearn because it's a splice seed or it's a hybrid seed or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember going to the Dominican Republic for the first time in 2019 myself, and being able to interview Henke Kellner. And, I asked him, I was like, so many people consider you to be a master blender. Like, how do you feel about that title? And he said, I don't feel like I'm a master blender, because that means you know everything there is to know about tobacco. And there's always something else new to learn. Like, you never get to a point where you know everything.
Yeah. And I think the only, like, it's I think this is one of the few industries where, like, to be a master, I think you have to be born into it, right? Like, as opposed to it's something that has to be, like, not only, like, maybe, like, I just had a kid, so maybe my son, that one day, if he decides to go into this industry, because of all that plethora of information, maybe one day he could be a master blender if he decided to go that route. But I just feel like there's so much out there that I don't even think I could get to that level yet. I would love to obviously be referred to as one, but there's just so much out there, and I think it's a little bit of to do with also teaching, and then also, again, the DNA breeding into you. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be in the fields from a young age and kind of play with everything, so there's some guys that'll look at a leaf and tell you exactly what it's going to taste like while it's growing, as opposed to me, where I have no idea what it's going to be like until I've smoked a pure grade.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you decide that you wanted to actually launch your own brand?
So as a retailer, I was getting very annoyed. I was, like, writing out these huge checks to these big companies, monthly, and people would keep coming into my store and being like, "Hey, I could buy that online for $5, and then you have it here for $20." And obviously there should be a little bit of a markup in a retail lounge because you're using the space, you're taking up the internet, but it shouldn't be a $15 markup on the brand. It shouldn't be that much. So, I realized, the store owners are making the brands famous, right? Because unless the store owner usually tells you to pick up something you don't know, you're not usually picking it up. Only the 1% of guys in our industry, or 2% or 5%, are guys that are going to be like, "Oh, that looks good, I want to try it," or "Tell me about that wrapper, what's in the filler? Oh, that sounds interesting, I want to try it." Most of the guys are going to be referred to by the shop owner, and now you're killing the shop owner. You're taking the shop owner out of the whole loop, and it's great for the legacy brands because anything that says Monte Cristo on it is going to sell. It's not going to make a difference, but it's not very good for different brands. Like, Drew Estate's not a legacy brand. It became a legacy brand now, but if there were no retailers, though, Drew Estate would have never gone to where it was. You know what I mean? So at some point I realized, and also I realized that at a retail store, you can only do as good as the city provides for you, right? So your city that you're in, and maybe the 4 cities around you that are surrounding you in your 50-mile radius, is what you're about to get in sales. So, and you can't run in front of your store and just start dragging people in, So I knew, I wanted to start a brand that's not online, insanely discounted. Yes, we are online, but we're not discounted online. You know what I mean? So that's one thing I really wanted for my brand. And I wanted to be able to be a little bit more in control of my destiny, meaning, like, if I'm having a bad day in sales, it's up to me to get out there and do what I need to do to get that sales better. As a retail store, it's hard to do that. You know what I mean? You got to do an event, plan a month ahead. Everything that you're going to do as a retailer, it's not going to be that day to score better sales. It's stuff that you're going to have to plan ahead and do stuff. Like I said, doing an event or doing a sale or doing something to get more sales in, but it's still, that day's still going to be a bad day in sales no matter what happens, right? So I kind of wanted to put more of the destiny in my hand, and I wanted to sell to the whole world as opposed to one city.
I think that's interesting what you said, because if you ever hear Eric Espinosa's story, he always says kind of a similar story in that he started off as a independent rep, and he would rep all these different companies and he would sell. And then he says he got to this point where, he was just killing it and making all these sales and doing all these connections, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. And his stories always comes to the conclusion that, but one day he got, an award or bonus for all his hard work, and he got a pink slip at the same time. And then that's when he realized that same realization that you have, that you can do all this work, but that didn't mean that he was like in control of his destiny. He was at the mercy of these other companies, and that made him want to find a way to get more control. And that's when he launched his own company. So it's kind of a similar story to yours, not the exact same.
Yeah,
it's like you all conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, and it's as long as it's people that have that drive, you know what I mean, to go out and do that thing. And Eric's one of those guys that he has the drive. No matter what he does, he's going to be good at. You know what I'm saying? So he's just one of those guys. It didn't matter what field he decided to get into. He was just going to be good at what he did.
Yeah, and I know even from speaking to him and other people who have done it, that saying that you want your own cigar brand is one thing, but actually doing it is a completely other. It requires different skill sets than even what you have as a retailer. At least with the retailer, you kind of know what people ask for. You have what questions they're asking. That kind of sets you up at least for a little bit of the success. But then you have to do the hard work of creating a brand, creating the product, getting the product in. So what was that transition like for you, from going just from being like, a retailer who was, selling and promoting these brands on a daily basis to suddenly you're going to create your own brand? What was that like?
So I'm always been a cigar geek. After a couple of years owning the business, I really enjoyed cigars. I like the industry. I like the fact that, you like in my shops, I always made it very open to anybody. So you could be from any walk of life and walk in, and you could have you could be a garbage collector, and you could be sitting next to a CEO and have a full-on conversation between the two that will only take effect in a cigar shop. 99% of the time, anywhere else, those two people would never probably share a conversation. You know what I mean? So being that cigar geek and loving the culture of it, I would always think in my head, like, hey, why didn't these guys do that? Why didn't these guys do this? So creating the brand wasn't as difficult. I think people taking me seriously was more difficult because, like, I'm me. I dress like this no matter where I go. I'm a t-shirt and jeans guy. So, like, even to this day, the people that I do volumes with, the first thing, like, I won't name any names, but like one of the factories, the owner, as soon as I walk in there, he like looks me from like head to toe, and he's judging my outfit, you know what I mean? And he's one of the old school guys, and I totally get it. And but like even him, it took him a few years. And I was doing, with that company, I was doing probably in my retail store 100,000 a year with easy. So like, obviously he knew I was good at business, because not that many retail stores are doing 100,000 a year in sales. So I get it wasn't the business part. It was just he still, for some reason, like, it was harder for him to take me seriously. Now he does take me 100% seriously, but still, I get that look up and down every time I walk into the office to have a conversation with them. And then also that also hindered me, I think, a little bit with opening accounts. Like, a lot of people were like, oh, who's this kid walking into my store? And I'm 39 now. I don't look like I'm 39. I know I get 20 and 30 all the time. But, I think that getting it in was harder for me than anything else, because there was so many people not taking me seriously. And, the guys that did know me, I wasn't, even with my shop, as serious as I was still one of those guys that like to go out and party and drink and have a good time. So I think even the guys that did know me were like, oh, this guy's going to just drink and party. He's not going to really take this seriously, So getting it in was the hardest part. All the stuff for the ideas and for the blends were obviously hard too. I wasn't a blender when I went in there. I used a lot of Manuel and Noah from La Aurora helped me out a lot with learning how to blend. And then now, I do a lot of business with El Artista also. And, between the two of them, I think I got a lot of history and lessons in tobacco. And then also Ram from El Artista has taught me a lot about the business side of it. So I'm very lucky, like, whether it's, I've made very good relationships with the right people. And I think they've helped me get to where I'm at today. I wasn't able to just walk in there and blend on my own, or, you know what I mean? And also the finances, like, I was on the retail side. I knew, what about this and what about that number, and but when you're on the manufacturing side, it's a total different story. You're working on more, your margins much smaller. Learning little secrets here and there to um, find better ways of making something happen, like a blend happen, without spending an insane ton of money. Fermenting, like all that stuff, I picked up from these guys. I had no idea what to do, but the ideas of what I wanted to try were already there. You know what I mean? So that part wasn't as hard because I had an idea of what I wanted to do. But my favorite thing is whenever the factory told me, "Oh no, James, you can't do that." Then that's when I feel like I'm doing the right thing, because a lot of my blends, like the Mr. Candela, the factory was telling me, "No, no, you don't put a Maduro wrapper and then put a Candela wrapper on top of it. It doesn't make sense, James. You're not supposed to do that." And like the Honor Among Thieves, it was supposed to be like all the Hero filler, and they're like, "No, James, you can't do that." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I want to learn on my own. Like, I want to try it. And it didn't work. I got it after the first time, but then we decided to go a different way by adding 5% Nicaraguan Seco and putting it in between every leaf to help with the combustion, and it worked great, and it's a phenomenal cigar. So I've gotten that a lot from the factory too. But these were all thoughts that I had when I was like just sitting in the retail store. Like, why didn't anyone try this before? Why didn't anyone do that before? So kind of more of on the geek side for me. For that stuff was a little bit easier.
Yeah, but you said something that was interesting about basically being the younger person coming into this industry, and you could have easily chosen to kind of, dress, dress in a business suit, look how they wanted you to look, and present it yourself that way, and then you would have gone back to your hotel room and dressed like you wanted to dress, and you would have probably felt just super drained because you were trying to act, in a completely different way than who you are. But you kind of came in there and you said, "This is who I am," and and maybe it meant that you had to prove yourself a little bit more, but at least you put yourself out there and saying like you knew who you were basically.
I don't get me wrong. I tried it. I wore a suit. Like, I have a ton of suits at home, and I love wearing suits, but
Right.
like that's not me, like it's more for like weddings and special occasions, and I love ties and I love suits, but I think like Guillermo, that I've been doing business with La Aurora, he's only seen me wear a suit one time, and I've been doing business with him for like 20 years plus. So it's I tried that, and I realized like it wasn't working. It wasn't me. Like, I was constantly readjusting myself and reasserting myself, and I wasn't comfortable. And when I decided not to wear the suit and tie, I feel like I was doing, but I wasn't doing that much better. I was still getting the "who the hell are you" and "why would anyone want to buy your cigars?" But at least I was comfortably getting that. Not and it's funny. I still do this. So even so I usually like being like basketball shorts or something like that. So even when I'm on the road, I won't wear basketball shorts. I'll wear jeans. But as soon as I hit the last shop, I'm in that parking lot, like getting out of those jeans and putting on those basketball shorts and putting on sneakers just so I could get home.
When it came to choosing a name for your company, how did you, your I think you co-founded the company with somebody. So how did you come up with that name?
So we had a list of names, and we kept like going back and forth and going back and forth. And Sinistro was the derivative of the word sinister. It's the Latin word for left. It means left in Latin. So the word sinister comes from Sinistro because left is bad and right is good. And if you wrote with your left hand, they would like smack you around until you start writing with your right hand because the left is bad. So that kind of had to play into it. And then we liked no political aspect, and we felt like we were the type of people, like, if you hit a fork in the road, everyone tells you to go right. Well, if you're a Sinistro, you go left. You know what I mean? Because everyone goes right. Try a different path. So that's kind of the play on words we wanted to use. And then also for like the first 6 months, we advertised, like, it was on our website too. We would put like the world's first left-handed cigar as like a joke, so it'd be easy to go in. But I had a few retailers literally go, "Hey, can you show me how this is a left-handed cigar?" And there's no real like good way of answering that. Like even as nice as you want to put it, it just still sounds like, well, you're an idiot. You didn't understand the joke. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna take that off the website, and I'm gonna stop making that. I'm gonna stop saying that from now on. You know what I mean? So it was more like, a list of different things that we put together. It wasn't like something we had focused on from the beginning. It was just something we picked off the list.
Well, I think that's I'm always interested about names, because I know like once you choose a name, it's like you have to kind of stick with it. So I'm pretty sure it's like it seems like it should be like the funnest part of your company, but once you get around to actually picking a name for anything that is going to be long term, it turns into a humongous task. Like you're like, oh my gosh, what this, that, is it taken already? Does somebody have a trademark on it already? So
and we have guys in our industry that just trademark anything. They don't care, as long as like if they think of it, they'll just go trademark it. So it might not even be in the industry ever, but it's already been trademarked by somebody.
Exactly, and and I've seen more and more in the news, not just the cigar industry, but trademark issues, patent issues, where companies are protecting themselves and kind of fending off competition by using a trademark or using a patent to say like, whoa, like that's ours, like you said, and they might not even have like a real product out there that does it, but they just hold that trademark. So congratulations on finding a name that hadn't been taken.
Yeah, I know, and that's a hard one. I don't think anyone would have trademarked that one, so I'm actually happy about that too. But and even though, like, even if, let's say you trademark it, you brought it out to the product out first. If someone like, let's just say General decides to sue you, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You can't really, like, as a boutique company, you can't fight somebody who's got billions of dollars to their, that could have no problem fighting you for, So even if like, that's why you've got to be very, very clean. Like, it's got to be something that's never been used and, never done before. And now, I mean, it's weird in our industry because, like, the Patrimonia just came out, like three companies use it, but no one sued anyone for it yet, And I think the three companies kind of talked to each other and they were like, hey, by the way, I did this. Don't worry about it, so it depends on who you're dealing with, right? If you get one of those guys that's going to be like, no, that's my name, I need you to get rid of it. You're going to, like, just like General and Opus got now, I guess, right? So it is what it is. Sometimes you might get away with it because you have a cool owner that you can just go talk to and be like, hey, my bad, I didn't know what happened, this, that. And, like Patrimonio, or I think that's the one that just came out, right? Last PCA, like 3 companies have that name.
I think
it's Patrimonio, yeah.
So
something like that.
Yeah. So what was the first Sinistro cigar that was created and kind of brought out to market?
Well, we brought out 3 blends at the beginning: the white, the black, and the red. The cigar. So the white and the black, I had a lot of help with Manuel on the blend. So it was a lot of back and forth with Manuel. The red, I knew I wanted a Maduro. I just didn't know. Like, I knew I wanted a Maduro. So I had done a few blends and none of them tasted good. So I wrote down a blend real quick for the master blender, for Manuel. And I was like, do me a favor, make this blend and ship it to me. Yeah. So that was my first one that I did like all on my own. And I didn't have any help with, because it was like literally last minute. And that blend ended up being which is the Mr. Red. I didn't end up changing it. It came out exactly the way I wanted it. So I would say technically the red was my first blend. But we did come out with 3 blends at the beginning: the white, red, and the black.
And you're talking about some of the retail perceptions or reception to you at the beginning. Like, what was it like once you had these blends and you were taking them to the retail stores? Like, how easy was it to get shelf space and what did it feel like for you now being on the other side of that? Because you used to be in like the retailer who was saying like, oh, like, let's think about this, or we'll try it out and stuff. And now you were the brand owner going to the retailer. Did that make it any easier, your experiences in retail, or did this kind of, was it just as hard?
So it was very depressing. Like the first 2, I'm not gonna lie, the first like year or 2 was very, very depressing because you're hearing constantly, no, no, who are you? Why would anyone buy your cigars? And um, I remember when like when in my store, in the LA shop when Boofy came out at the beginning, I kind of saw like what could happen with Boofy. Same thing with Caldwell. So I jumped on those brands as soon as they came. Same thing with Drew Estate. I jumped
Hmm.
on those brands right away. Uh, I was not a big flavored smoker, but at that point, someone had told me, because I used to sell a ton of Cuba Cuba, but I also talk shit a lot about Cuba Cuba as a smoker. Someone pulled me to the side one time and told me, he's like, you realize how many new smokers that cigar has brought into our industry? Like, so before you laugh at that cigar, and I was like, wow, you're totally 100% right. Like, I never looked at it that way, So the guys who are not into that tobacco flavor, a lot of them start off with a Cuba Cuba or a Blondie Bellicoso, something like that, and then move on to your cigars. So I was hoping more retailers would be kind of more like me, and you know but in our industry, we have a lot of retirees. We have a lot of older gentlemen that are more fixed on their ways, uh, you
Hmm.
know, and they're not looking to, expand and go. And I had to deal with California, which is one of the hardest states because I live in California. So I was basically doing California at the beginning. Um, Smaller humidors because retail space is expensive. So shelf space it's very hard to get your cigars in because there's hardly any shelf space. And also, I think like in the Bay, when I had my store, I was one of the top stores in the Bay. In San Jose, we did phenomenally well. Like I was probably the top grossing store in the Bay. I think that also hurt me because people thought they were by buying my cigars, they thought it was going to help my retail store, right? So even though I was gone from there, I think a lot of retailers, I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh, why should I you know, pay for his cigars. One day he's just going to open a shop next to my store again. You know what I mean? And I didn't do that. What I did was when I went up to San Jose to open a store, the mall asked me to come up because all our stores were in outdoor malls at the time. And the mall over there had seen one of our stores. My friend had like 6 of them and I had one. And the mall invited us to come up there, check out the area. So I had no idea about that city. I'd never been to San Jose in my life. And I never ventured out of San Jose other than that mall. I went to the mall. I saw the mall. I saw that the nightlife and how many people it brought in. As soon as I saw that, I was ready to sign the lease. So I think that kind of hindered me more than helped me, just because like I still do not do well in the Bay. I'm starting now to start doing better in the Bay, but it's mostly stores that have switched ownership that are ready to bring in my product now, as opposed to the ones that still were there when I had my store. They're now very eager to order.
So I want to make sure that we touch on some of your recent releases. So beginning with the Envy. So tell us about that one. I know it's a re-release.
Okay, so we bring out Envy once a year. It's a 10-year-old Corojo wrapper, so it's Corojo's. When we make it into a Maduro, so we lose. Um, I don't know exactly, but let's say 20 to 30% on the wrapper when we're making it a Maduro because it's so thin. And also being 10 years, that's another thing the factory told me never to do. They're like, why would you make a 10-year-old wrapper into Maduro? That's like blasphemy. It doesn't make sense. And, I was like, well, because it's never really been done before. No one takes an aged wrapper and, tries to make it better, because it has 10 years of age, that wrapper is ready to go the way it is, So, um, and then they were warning me, you're going to lose this much wrapper making it into a Maduro, and it's going to be more expensive because we have to factor in the cost of how much wrapper we're going to lose. And so I really, the blend came out phenomenally well. The Corojo we use, and we don't want to be this company where, like last year, we brought out 300 boxes. I think this year we're at 320 boxes that we're going to bring out, maybe less. I'm still figuring out the numbers from the wrapper, however much we have left over. But we want to keep it at a 10-year age. So we have a lot of stores that want to open with Envy. There's a lot of stores that want to bring it in, but we don't want to take the 9-year-old wrapper and use it and say it's a 10-year-old wrapper. So we're very like, again, me being a cigar geek, I'm very anal about stuff like that. And so there's a release this year. It'll be out in November, at some point in late October or early November. It's going to 30 shops. So we try to expand it this year. Last year it went to 10 shops. This year we're expanding it to 30 shops or 26, depending on how much wrapper we have. And, we kind of, like one of our consumers is Cigar Box, and I was talking to them about it out of Vegas. And these guys, they were telling me, they're like, for us, we would like you to keep it at 10 stores because we'll get a lot more. And, we're very exclusive. He's like, but for you, he's like, this is a very good cigar. You should get it out there. So I heed the advice, and I decided to open it up to 30 stores this time around instead of 10. But last time around, the 10 stores got 15 of each size. This time around, everyone's getting like 5 of each size. And it's only in Robusto and Toro.
And what about the 10-year anniversary release? And I understand it has a special wrapper.
So the 10-year anniversary will be coming out. So the reason why I have it coming out at the same time is because I know the 30 shops that are taking Envy, they're going to take it regardless because they want it. Now, I feel bad as a manufacturer only giving something special to 10 shops. So it was our 10-year anniversary. So we wanted to release it at the same time we released the Envy. So not just those 10 shops that got Envy can brag about getting something new from Sinistro, but all these other, the 10-year anniversary is going to be open to all of our customers. We're only doing 200 boxes of Robusto and 200 boxes of Toro. And we're using an exclusive wrapper that hasn't been used yet. Literally up until last night, I was asking the factory how much information I'm allowed to give on it and what I'm not allowed to give on it, because it's obviously their product. So it's a new wrapper. It's a seed. I can't talk about the origin of the seed, but it's grown in the Dominican Republic. The look of it is very close to broadleaf, but it tastes totally different. It's a seed that's been breeded for a few years, and we're at a point now where we want to use it. Before we were selling a lot of it to the roll your own companies, and I know when you say that, it's a turnoff, but people have to realize that's how broadleaf started. Broadleaf started the same way, and then one cigar manufacturer was like, "Hey, I'm going to put it on a cigar," and broadleaf became famous in our industry. So I know it's a little bit of a turnoff bringing up roll your own tobacco stuff when you're talking about cigars, but again, that's how broadleaf started. But it's probably the only pure grade I've ever smoked that I'm happy with just smoking the pure grade. I know most pure grades are one-dimensional, and usually if it's a bitter or a sweet, it's overly powering on that one dimension. But this pure grade was very monotone, very flavorful. You could almost roll it. You could almost sell it as a pure grade, and it would still be a very good cigar. But again, we're just going to be able to call it like a Dominican broadleaf. It looks very similar to Pennsylvania, actually, more than Connecticut, but very flavorful, very tasty. And unfortunately, that's all I could give out on the information on the cigar. But hopefully, I think because the guys I get it from, they're not like I've been trying to keep it exclusive forever, but I know he's going to let us use it for now. And I don't think it's going to be exclusive to us, but I think it's going to be a wrapper that's going to probably do just as well as San Andreas and broadleaf, if not better.
And then what about the last Barbarian?
So the last Barbarian, it was supposed to be a PCA drop, but we just got it. We just released it. I got one right here. So the Barbarian is full-bodied. We use 40% Super Ligero or Medio Tempo inside. It's Pennsylvania Maduro wrapper. Very good smoke. super medio tempo or super ligero is very, so in Dominican they call it super ligero, in Nicaragua they call it medio tempo, so it's very hard to get your hands on. So finally, after a whole bunch of kicking, screaming, begging, and fighting with as many people as I could fight with, I was able to get a decent amount of it where we'll be able to bring this out regularly. But it's Piloto Cubano super ligero, so Piloto doesn't grow as tall as the rest of the plant, so it's more of a creamy super ligero. It does have a bite, but there's a lot of volume behind it. There's a lot more body and a lot more flavor behind it than strength, even though it does get you at the back of your throat right here like a super ligero should. It's not just beat you up, and it's got a nice flavor profile behind it too.
Awesome. So all of your cigars, are they made in the Dominican Republic?
Yes. Well, because of so I'm actually very good standing where I'm at. So the La Aurora pretty much buys all their Nicaraguan tobacco from Aganorsa, and they have a good amount of Brazilian tobacco that I can get from. So like the Jalapa that they're using for the 107 Nicaragua and La Aurora, the Esteli, the Condege, they're all getting from Aganorsa. So Aganorsa has great tobacco for Nicaragua. So I'm able to use whatever I need from them. If I want Aganorsa tobacco, I go through them. And then El Artista has a very good relationship with Plasencia. Plasencia buys a lot of their Dominican tobacco from El Artista. So a lot of Plasencia's Nicaraguan tobacco they're buy from. So I have choice pick from Nicaragua, and both factories have their own spots in Ecuador. So really the only thing Indonesia now is grown in Ecuador. A lot of Connecticut's grown in Ecuador. The only thing you really need at that point is Brazil, So, and with Brazil, I have, La Aurora and whatever I need from El Artista. If I need something Brazilian, obviously because they're not growing it or it's not from their farm, it's a little bit more expensive, but I have access to the better stuff than, I have more access to Nicaraguan tobacco than a Nicaraguan boutique factory has, because of the volume that my factories are spending with those companies and buying. They're obviously getting the higher grade product from.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting and important to point out because, like you said, even though it's manufactured in Dominican Republic, it has these tobaccos from, like you said, Plasencia and Aganorsa. So that's kind of like the best tobacco that you can probably get. So it has those influences in there. I just want people to know that, so that if they're wondering, where is this tobacco coming from? It's coming from some pretty big companies out there.
Yeah, and and obviously both companies have their own spots in Ecuador, so their Ecuadorian tobacco is obviously whatever I want at that point, and their Dominican tobacco, they're both huge on farming and growing their own tobacco. So again, I'm able to get choice on Dominican tobacco, Nicaraguan, Honduran, and obviously Brazilian. And again, same thing with the broadleafs. Like, it's smaller. Like if I was working out of a smaller factory in Nicaragua, I wouldn't be able to get my hands on broadleaf, or even in the Dominican Republic. The reason being is because like Swisher or someone will come and buy the whole container, as opposed to someone like me. I want to pick the best cuts and buy the best cuts. So why sell to me when you could sell the whole container without anyone going through your container and just paying for it right away? As opposed to me, I have to check this bale, I have to check this bale, I want this bale, I don't want this bale. Well, for, when you're selling the Swisher, no one's going to argue with you. They're just going to take the whole trailer, So my guys, when they're getting their stuff from Connecticut or from Pennsylvania, they're just buying the whole thing. And then, because they have their own distribution methods for their tobacco, they're selling whatever's left over out to somebody else.
Now, what is it like? Because I heard you earlier in the interview refer to Sinistro as a boutique company. And I'm always curious about how people feel about boutique now, because for me, it's a term I don't even use a lot as like I used to, because I feel like to a certain degree, everyone is boutique except for a handful of companies in the industry right now. Like everybody's boutique. So I don't even know what that means. So for you, what does it mean to be boutique, a boutique cigar company?
Well, I mean, like last year, everyone has a different definition of boutique. I hear so many different things like, oh, if you do 500,000 cigars, you're not boutique anymore. If you do 1,000,000 cigars, you're not boutique anymore. For me, I think you're boutique until you stop caring about your tobacco, you know. And there's some companies out there that were never boutique, in my opinion. I think boutique
No.
is taken, uh, you know, I'm not the type to go just talk bad about a company, you know, so I'm not going to name any names, but there's some companies out there that, you know, as a retailer and, you know, being in the industry for so long, they were in it for the money, you know what I mean? And now they're close to the legacy brands. I wouldn't call them a legacy brand, you know, but, you know, they, whether they went into it going and trying to be boutique and they got screwed because, you know, especially back then, like, it was very hard to go start your own brand. Now it's a little bit easier, but back then a lot of people were selling you their junk tobacco because they just wanted to get rid of it. You know what I mean? If you didn't know what you're talking about, they're like, yeah, I'll take this and get the hell out. You know what I mean? So whether it's that or whether it's not that, I think boutique is like I think Dion was always going to be boutique. You know, until the day he can't fly to Nicaragua anymore and pick his own cuts. You know what I mean? And there's some brands that are huge that have, you know, legacy style. You know, and I also don't think you could consider yourself boutique if you're not doing your own blends. You know what I mean? If you're going in and you're asking the blender of the factory or the owner of the factory to do your blends for you, then you're just making another cigar that's theirs. It's not your cigar. You know what I mean? You have no control over it. Now, then you're just repackaging, right? At that point, because it's still that brand's cigar. It's just you didn't make that; he made it for you. You know what I mean? You might have had some direction in the say, like, "Oh, I want it to be strong," and blah blah blah. But I think boutique is when you actually is when you're picking your cuts, doing your blends, and actually, you know, when you have a passion for it. Other than that, you're just repackaging and selling cigars. You know, and that's kind of becoming a boom now too. There's a lot of new companies coming out through other channels that are just white labeling stuff. And, you know, white labeling to me is not, you know, it's not your brand. You know what I mean? And I get it. It's hard to get your own brand started, but, you know, anyone that comes and talks to me, I've helped them 110%. And I think that's another thing that's missing in our industry. You know, I think competition is good, and I don't think competition is such a bad thing. But I feel like the legacies are not too happy about all the boutiques and all the big. And one thing to show for it is, you know, if you look at who was suing the FDA, there wasn't that many. There was no legacies suing the FDA, because at the end of the day, if the FDA got away with if they got their ruling in, the legacies were fine. Nothing was going to happen to the legacies. People like me would have been gone or paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to make a cigar. And obviously I can't afford to make a cigar for $100,000. You know, I could afford the bands, the boxes, and I could afford flying to the Dominican and blending. But after that, you know, I can't sell a $50 cigar, you know? But if I have to pay $100,000 to bring it out and get FDA approval, you know, that cigar is going to have to be at a $50 price point now, you know? So I just feel like, you know, the legacies should have been in front of the lawsuits. No legacies really put out too much money for the lawsuits. I know it went through Cigar Rights of America and, you know, and all this other stuff. And there was a set amount that some of the legacies were paying, but it wasn't, you know, a lot of these guys could have taken the horse by the rein and done it themselves. You know what I mean? With the backing and the money and the, you know, they have more money than Cigar Rights, and they have way more money than Aficionado does. So, you know, they could have taken the reins and fought for the industry themselves, but they didn't.
At this point in the show, I usually like to kind of switch around the format a little bit and ask like 2 questions to kind of round out the show. The first of those questions being, what is your why? Like, what motivates you to do what you do?
Well, before, I think it was more a love for the industry. And I still do have that now in me. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of stuff did change in my life. I just had a kid 16 months ago. So I think
Nice.
my why and my drive now is more my kid. Like, I don't spend any money on myself anymore. You know, like everything goes to my kid and wife. And I think within the last year and year and a half, before it was to prove it that I could do it more to myself, uh, you know, and obviously the people that care about me, the people I love. Obviously, finances. You obviously want to make money, whatever it is you're doing. But I felt like I was always lucky because I was doing something I loved a lot and I was very happy about. But now I feel like my drive has totally changed, and I felt it. But before, I would bring out product and I wouldn't hesitate. I would just bring it out. I wouldn't worry about it. If it sold, it sold. If it didn't sell, oh well, I bankrupt, whatever. But I tried. Now, the one of the last when I was doing La Fabrica, I sat down and I talked with Ram, and I was like, bro, like I'm a little scared about this. Should I go ahead with it? Like he's like, why are you having these thoughts? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just second guessing myself. And he's like, is it because of your kid? And me and Ram kind of had kids at the same time. Like his kid is maybe like 3 months older than mine, 4 or 5 months max. So, with life, we were talking a lot about life, and he's like, are you second guessing yourself because of your kid? I'm like, maybe I am, dude. I don't know. But is it weird? He's like, no, man, it's okay. It's normal. And I that's when I started realizing that my focus has changed a little bit. Now it has to matter. It has to sell. It has to work. Because at the end of the day, I have people relying on me.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me. Even though I don't have kids, but I can completely get where you're coming from. Um, Off of that question, uh, if somebody were to come to you and say that they had their own idea for a business, but they had no idea how to get started, and it may not necessarily be a cigar or tobacco related business, but what would be your advice to that person who wants to become an entrepreneur and kind of start something kind of on their own?
One thing I will say, and this is just in life that I've learned, anything you stick to, you'll be good at. If you really have that drive, if you really are going to go out and put yourself in that, like me when Sinistro first started, I was using my dad's closet for the humidor. I put Spanish cedar inside. I got a humidor, humidifier, the whole nine. I put an own AC unit in there so I could control the temperature all the time. And I was literally running the stores all day long. And then obviously I'm not going to affect his business. So, he's an accountant and he still has the insurance business that I talked about from the beginning of the show. So like that, I literally just gave to him and I'm like, you guys deal with this. I don't want to deal with it anymore. And so obviously I couldn't come in and start shipping or bring in product that's delivered until 6 p.m. So, I remember one time I was shipping in the office and I think I had like 90 shipments to do. And I got in at like 7 or 8 p.m. and I like looked outside and the sun was already out. It wasn't like opening time. It wasn't 10 a.m. yet, like, cause no one was here for the office, but it was like close to
Right.
like 8 a.m., and I was like, holy shit, I'm still here. Like, what the hell's going on? And obviously I finished up what I was doing and I went home and I slept for like a good, 8 hours, but then I was right back on the road again after I was done doing that. So it's not about just sticking to what it is, sticking and pushing yourself every day, and eventually you'll get whatever it is, as long as you're consistent with it, you'll be good at it.
Awesome. Can you, for those people who are not watching this, who maybe just listening to this in an audio format, could you tell people what website and what Instagram they need to follow and what other social media in order to keep up with what you and Sinistro are doing?
So thank you. Sorry, I'm not good at this stuff. So thanks for mentioning it. The website is sinistrocigars.com. Cigars plural, not with one R, but cigars. And the Instagram is also Sinistro Cigars. Facebook is Sinistro Cigars. Twitter is Sinistro Cigars. And I think that's all of our social media. And usually, we have somebody that helps out with our social media. But me and Coleman try to get on. Coleman's my business partner. He's out in Pennsylvania. But we try to get on and, talk to everybody as much as we can. And we try to like comment on every post as much as we can. So if you do want to reach out to one of us, you know, that's the best way of getting a hold of us.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Like I said, I learned a lot about your brand, and hopefully people who are watching or listening to this learn a little bit more, and they're looking forward to coming out and trying your brand. I know we had somebody who was watching during the show, Jason. He said that he was smoking a red. So you have people obviously out there who are smoking Sinistro. Hopefully you don't have the same problems you did at the beginning of your company. And you know, people know when you walk into a store that you're the real deal, and they bring in your product and give you all a shot. So thank you for coming on, and hopefully you and your business partner could come on here again at some point, and we can continue the discussion about the brand and some of your experiences in the industry.
I'm always up for it. Whenever you want, you got me.
Awesome. I want to thank everyone for watching today. So if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, just make sure you hit that like button or a subscribe button. And also, if you're listening to this on any of the podcasting platforms, just make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anything like that. And also leave a review, because reviews help me to improve what we're doing here. If you don't like something, that's fine to put in a review. You're not going to hurt my feelings, because there's always room for improvement. And if you do like something, you can post that too, because I can do more of that. So yeah, so we have shows.
Yeah, compliments are always good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's both ends. So it's, like I said, you're not going to hurt my feelings, and it's not going to go to my head. So post whatever you would like. If you miss any of this episode or any of the other 109 episodes, you can catch them all on deepcutslive.com and also on YouTube. And we have a new show next week with Brandon from Renegade Cigars. So a retailer, pretty cool things. He's blending. He's, like I said, he has a great retail store. So it's going to be one of those shows like this one that you won't want to miss. So thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, dude. You know, I haven't done a lot of your deep cut shows, but I've read a lot of your articles and stuff. So I've always read your stuff when I was a retailer. Now it's pretty crazy that I'm on the show with you. So, you know, I never expected this.
An article to go with it.
Yeah. And that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, things are night and day now. You know, I talk to my partner all the time, and I'm like, dude, did you ever think it was gonna get like this? And we were always like, no, dude. Like, especially not this fast. You know, so we're very humbled. We're very happy, and you know, we appreciate everyone that supports us. And even if you don't support us, you know, at least you're in the cigar industry smoking cigars. Good for you.
Awesome. Couldn't say it better myself. So, like I said, we'll have to work on an article for my other job at some point and get that kind of coverage for you. But we'll talk about that offline and such. But thank you for coming on, and thank you everybody for watching. And until next time.